questions of arbitrage, etc., will not come about, and the monies of this coming from such taxes can go to a special fund. Because you see, say for an individual country such a tax is imposed, and the money collected, if it goes to the consolidated fund, then the money becomes fungible. It need not necessarily be used, that money need not be necessarily used for equity or sustainability purposes. It can go elsewhere. So a special fund needs to be created, and I think this fund, such a tax as well as creating a fund to collect such a tax would be very welcome, given that it addresses key issues of equity and sustainability. Now, if one looks at Sri Lanka's case of equity, as pointed out by Dr. Gunawardena, we have a lot of problems in regard to the area of inequality. In fact, World Bank 2000, when they undertook a study in 2000, and they decomposed the change in poverty into parts that were a result of growth and parts that were a result of inequality. And the results indicated if inequality did not increase between 1990 and 2002, the observed growth in mean consumption due to the high growth rate we had would have been sufficient to reduce poverty more, and in fact to bring it to a single digit level by 2002. But due to the inequality, the power of economic growth trickling down to the levels really required did not take place. In other words, the increase in inequality that took place during 1990 to 2002 prevent the decline in poverty headcount by this margin they are talking about. So World Bank went on to argue that Sri Lanka was deeply entrapped in an inequality trap. In addition to that, we have regional underdevelopment, which also prevent poverty decline in those regions with overall higher growth. So in a nutshell, what I am trying to say is that, you see, economists usually speak about income elasticity of poverty, or to what extent high growth will trickle down and combat poverty. What is standing on its way is, one is the prevailing inequality in the system, the other one the regional disparity, and this is what needs to be addressed. Delaney also referred in her presentation to the Sri Lanka's MDG report, which we jointly produced with the UNDP and the National Council for Economic Development in the Ministry of Finance and Planning, and basically we argued that Sri Lanka is on track as far as achieving Millennium Development Goals were concerned. However, though we are in track, there are many regional disparities. Now, if you look at this, the poverty headcount in this table, if you look at a place like, for example, Sabaragamuwa, you will find that the poverty headcount, though the national average was 15.2% in 2006-07, in Uwa and Sabaragamuwa, right at the bottom over there, was 27% and 24.2% respectively. Then, so if one looks at the other area in regard to social protection, a key area, the expenditure allocated for education, one could see that, since the liberal economy took off in Sri Lanka in the post-1977 period, there has been a decline of the allocations of funds to education, and this was further aggravated with the war going on during that period, where some of the expenditure that could have gone to a important social sector like education getting diverted to defense. Then in Sri Lanka, in addition to the expenditure required to for the education sector, we also have a post-conflict situation which demands additional expenditure on education. For instance, reintegrating the to school curriculums, dealing with ex-child combatants, then psychosocial support, so on and so forth, especially in the north and the east. So some additional expenditure in regard to education is required if you are really talking about social protection on the lines that have been articulated in this report. Even if we look at the health expenditure, that average around 2.5% of GDP had come down to about 1.5, 1.8% of GDP over the years. So this is also an area that needs to be looked at in little bit more in detail. And in fact, I'm happy to say that yesterday's budget that was presented in Parliament, some of these factors were taken into account, and additional allocations have been made both to education and health. Now health, the area that needs emphasis once again is the post-conflict situation. Now if you look at Sri Lanka's average and look at some of the cities in the north and the east. Now for example, infant mortality, though the Sri Lankan average is 11.2, in an area like Kilinochchi it's 27.8, in Mana 22.3. Again, if you look at an area like maternal mortality, though the Sri Lankan average is about 14, this is the rate per 1,000 live births. The Sri Lankan maternal mortality is 14, the average. In a city like Kilinochchi, it's 158, in Mullaitivu 123. Low birth weight in 2001, this is the percentage, Sri Lankan average 16.7, in a place like Jaffna, Trincomalee 30.5. And these type of statistics are visible for underweight, home deliveries, safe sanitation, all that. So the point I'm trying to emphasize is that the regional disparities is also an important issue when we are looking at this whole issue of social protection. And as all of us know, there is this very important program called the Samurdhi program. It needs a little bit more better targeting so that the really deserving people become beneficiaries of this program. And the government has introduced a new participatory methodology named family classification methodology to the beneficiary selection procedure. So its effectiveness is yet to be seen. Now, one area that is a bit of a concern, which we have highlighted in the State of the Economy report of the IPS this year, is that 61.3% of the employed in this country are in the informal sector. So the informal sector lacks many things. Of course, you know, gradually things like pension schemes are being introduced for farmers, fishermen, etc. But many social beneficiary systems that the people working in the formal sector have, the people in the informal sector does not possess. So this is also a factor that has to be taken into account when designing these social protection programs. So I will not go into the financial allocations in regard to the environment area. The minister already said that Sri Lanka had identified 10 trust areas for environmental sustainability. Sri Lanka is still a low carbon emitting country, so you know, the amount of resources at this moment is not as highly demanded in the environmental sector as compared to the social protection and social welfare sector. So as I mentioned, in this budget that was presented yesterday, substantial allocations have been made to health and the education areas, taking due cognizance of this problem of regional disparity prevailing. And I also saw more allocations being made to rural development as well as SMEs, small and medium enterprises. So all in all, in regard to resource mobilization, what I have to say is that the Presidential Taxation Commission came up with recommendations that the current 14% of GDP revenue in this country should be increased to about 20% of GDP revenue in the medium to long term, and that would be the best form of resource mobilization in the country rather than heavily depending on commercial borrowing. And to this, if in a future day this financial transaction taxes etc. makes their contribution, I am sure government will have more policy space to focus attention in these two crucial areas of social protection and sustainability, that are the two areas that have been emphasized, and work on the win-win strategy where equity and sustainability are mutually reinforcing for further enhancing human development indicators in Sri Lanka. Thank you.